Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're heading out for a night on the town, 1950s London style. Forget modern pub crawls, avocado toast, or having a smartphone to rescue you when you get lost. Tonight, you're about to experience the joys and, frankly, deep regrets of a proper post-war London night out. Imagine a world where every pint tastes slightly of coal dust, everyone's hair is held together with Brill cream and desperation, and the tube shuts down before your evening even gets interesting. Before we slip into our sharpest suit or our swishest new look from Woolworths, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but honestly, only if you actually enjoy what happens here. No pressure. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and, of course, what time it is for you. Is it after midnight? Are you already in bed? Or is this the part where you accidentally pull an all-nighter listening to a total stranger talk about rationing, smog and bad dancing? Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for that sweet, comforting white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe slip under the covers and pretend it's a chilly London evening and you've just dodged a particularly suspicious puddle on the pavement. But let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what really happened on a night out in 1950s London? Did people honestly spend hours queuing just to buy a single lukewarm pint? Did everyone smoke like it was a competitive sport? What happened if you tried to dance after 3 gin and tonics and a steak and kidney pie? Was there really a secret language for ordering at the chippy? Could you actually survive the night in heels, or were you destined to lose one in a puddle and limp home? Slightly heroic, mostly embarrassed. And most importantly, could you, a thoroughly modern, slightly spoiled person with an internet connection and a robust sense of hygiene, last a single night out in the fog, the jazz clubs, and the mystery meat sandwiches of post-war London? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1953, it's Friday evening, and you're about to discover why your grandparents never talk about the details. You take stock of the battlefield, a cramped, slightly tilting living room with wallpaper so faded it's gone from optimistic floral to existential beige. The kettle's already been boiled 3 times out of sheer nervous energy, and there are more tea stains on the linoleum than there are tea bags left in the tin. You're sharing the space with 2 flatmates, one endlessly cheerful, the other perpetually sulking about a girl he met once at Woolworths, who allegedly broke his heart and his only hairbrush. There's an uneasy truce regarding the hot water. Whoever bathes first wins, but the loser is forced to make do with a sponge, a saucepan, and a vague hope for dignity. Tonight's mission: look glamorous on a budget that wouldn't buy you a sandwich in Soho. The wardrobe options are best described as limited but eager. You consider your choices: the slightly shiny trousers or the skirt with a hem that could unravel at any moment. Both smell faintly of mothballs and last Thursday's chips. A single pressed shirt is shared among the flatmates, passed around like a relay baton in the Olympics of underachievement. If you're lucky, you can swap out your socks for a pair that only has a small hole, strategically hidden under your best shoes, which incidentally squeak with every step like a chorus of anxious mice. There is, of course, the mirror, an artifact of war in this household. Your roommate, perched in front of it with military precision, attacks his hair with the last of the Brill cream, attempting a style somewhere between James Dean and I haven't slept since rationing ended. You queue up behind him, clutching your meagre grooming supplies, a cracked comb, a lipstick stub for the bold, and enough hairspray to ensure that, in the event of a nuclear incident, your fringe would remain unscathed. The mirror fogs, someone opens the window, the neighbour's cat yowls in protest, and you all pretend this is perfectly normal. The conversation is a mix of anticipation and financial dread. "How much have you got?" someone asks as you all count coins on the table, the soundtrack of clinking shillings punctuated by groans. Pooled together, you have just enough for 2 pints, 3 bus fares, and 1 emergency pork pie. No one brings up the fact that last week's night out ended with someone trying to barter a packet of custard creams for entry to the dance hall. That's in the past. Tonight anything could happen. Rationing may be officially over, but it's left its mark. The soap is half a bar, carefully sliced into even thinner slices, and everyone's quietly pretending not to notice the lingering aroma of boiled cabbage coming from the kitchen. You debate whether to put on extra perfume or simply hope the pub will be too smoky for anyone to care. Someone produces a battered tin of talcum powder, which, when shaken, produces exactly one puff and a small cloud of ancient dust. You call that good enough. As the hour ticks toward departure, there's a mad dash for essentials. You stuff your pockets with bus tokens, a tube of barley sugar, and, in a fit of optimism, a spare pair of stockings or a safety pin. Someone grabs an umbrella, an act of hubris in London, where rain is both inevitable and unsympathetic. You argue briefly about whether to bring the wireless, before realising it hasn't worked since the Queen's coronation. Before leaving, you huddle in the narrow hallway for a group photo, though no one owns a camera. Instead, you commit this to memory. The anticipation, the nerves, the scent of too much hair product and not enough hope. You lock the door behind you, leaving behind a flat that is somehow both sanctuary and prison, and step out into the night. You're ready, or at least as ready as anyone in 1950s London ever is. And as the door clicks shut, you realise that the real magic of a night out doesn't come from your outfit, your wallet, or your hair. It comes from the absurd optimism that, no matter how chaotic the pre-game may be, tonight could be the night you remember forever, or at least the night you finally manage to get a second look in the mirror. You are your best suit, which you've worn to 3 weddings, a funeral, and at least 1 minor fire. It's a bit snug. The shoulder pads could be classified as dangerous weapons, and the dress option requires engineering skills you do not possess. Somewhere between nostalgia and mild panic, you approach the wardrobe, a creaking, overstuffed relic that's seen more history than most museum exhibits. The hangers clatter like distant thunder. You flip past the special occasion jacket, permanently scented with mothballs and an undertone of anxiety. A shirt with a mystery stain you've decided is vintage, and finally your prize, the last clean suit. The term clean is generous. It's more that you've convinced yourself the collar looks fine if you don't turn your head too quickly. You attempt to step into your trousers, performing a small, hopeful ritual that involves holding your breath, wriggling with determination, and contemplating the laws of physics as applied to wool. 1 leg in, a hop, a wiggle, and success. Except, of course, the waistband is now engaged in open rebellion. You get it halfway buttoned, then try to suck in your stomach and summon your inner 1940s film star. It works, barely. But now you're afraid to sit down, sneeze, or breathe too enthusiastically. For the dress wearers, things are not easier. Your last remaining party dress, bought at a jumble sale and altered with more hope than actual skill, stares back at you with the sullen defiance of a teenager asked to wash the dishes. The zipper is a negotiation. The hem, never quite straight, insists on rising in the back as if trying to flee the scene. Fastening the buttons requires both a steady hand and a firm belief in miracles. You call for assistance, and after a short but spirited battle involving 3 hairpins and a shoelace, the dress is secured. You do not attempt to bend over, lest the entire structure collapse like a house of cards. Accessories are less finishing touches and more acts of desperation. The only available tie is so shiny it could serve as an emergency signal for low-flying aircraft. You attempt a Windsor knot but achieve something closer to avant-garde origami. Pocket handkerchief? It's yesterday's ironed napkin. For those in dresses, a single strand of imitation pearls adds a whiff of glamour, provided you ignore the missing clasp and the fact that it once spent a night in the teapot. As you study your reflection, shoulder pads askew, seams straining, shoes hastily polished with margarine because you've run out of actual polish, you realise you're embodying a certain post-war British spirit, the relentless determination to make do. The suit may be older than you are, the dress may be a structural hazard, but tonight you look the part. Sort of. There's an awkward, shared laughter among your flatmates as you parade through the living room for inspection. Compliments are exchanged with the solemnity of international treaties. You look smashing, someone insists, like you've just stepped out of a newsreel. You choose to believe them, or at least to believe that the lighting in the dance hall will be dim enough for everyone's benefit. Outside, London waits, a city still dusting itself off from war, where everyone is slightly battered, slightly patched together, and yet determined to celebrate anyway. You add the finishing touch, a spritz of cologne or perfume, so potent and mysterious it could be weaponized by the Ministry of Defence. You give your reflection one last bracing nod and tell yourself that confidence is the real accessory. As you leave, the suit or dress stretches and protests, but you walk a little taller. Because deep down, you know that everyone else out there is doing the same thing, hoping the seams hold, the buttons stay fastened, and that for just one night, you'll all look like you belong in a London fashion advert, albeit one with a very generous return policy and a faint smell of boiled vegetables. The evening beckons and you're ready to face it in style, or at least in something that used to be stylish. You face the final pre-departure hurdle, taming your hair with more Brill cream than medically advised, and attempting to mend a ladder in your only pair of stockings using nail polish and hope. The clock is ticking menacingly toward the hour when the bus, which never waits, will abandon you to a night of cold feet and missed opportunities. In the cramped, foggy mirror, your reflection stares back, equal parts desperate and determined. The flat's bathroom, a place of untold tragedy and a faint, lingering smell of carbolic soap, is tonight's arena. For the gentleman, Brill cream is less a styling product and more a survival tactic. The tiny jar is passed around like a communion chalice, and you scoop out a generous blob, wondering if there's such a thing as hair product intoxication. The bathroom quickly turns into a chemistry lab as the smell of Brill cream mingles with shaving soap, toothpaste, and anxiety. You slick your hair back so fiercely it could deflect shrapnel. The goal is Cary Grant, but the result is closer to surprised duck. A nervous pat down and a quick comb, stolen from the kitchen drawer, finish the look, leaving you both glossy and vaguely flammable. On the other side of the door, an epic struggle is underway with hosiery. Stockings, the single remaining pair, are a relic from before the war ended, carefully rationed and more precious than gold. A fresh ladder has appeared down the side, running like a fault line through your dignity. Nail polish, cheap, pink, and last seen somewhere under the settee, is hastily applied. It's not a solution so much as a ceasefire. The ladder halts, but the stocking now sports a sticky, slightly radioactive patch that attracts lint, stray hair, and your last ounce of patience. Everyone in the flat has advice: try clear polish. It's gone. Dab it with glue, last used in 1947. Just wear trousers. Not an option. You've already lost the trouser debate, and the skirt is a non-negotiable part of the ensemble. Finally, with a gentle tug and a silent prayer to the patron saint of hosiery, you manage to hoist the stockings into place. They'll hold, provided you walk exclusively in straight lines and avoid sudden movement, stares, or hope. In the background, there's a soundtrack of arguments over whose turn it is for the razor, whose toothbrush ended up in the wrong mug, and whether you can borrow half a bobby pin. Someone's applying powder, coughing as it fills the air like a Victorian smog. Lipstick is rationed by the inch, one swipe, then you twist it down as if hiding state secrets. Mascara is optional, but only if you want to spend the night with one eye stuck shut. As the minutes tick down, you realise the greatest test isn't the grooming itself, but the relentless sharing of space and resources. Every brush is communal property. Every product comes with a story, usually involving at least one relative, one blackout, and a minor electrical fire. The window steams up, blurring your view of yourself into a vague, hopeful outline. You declare victory anyway. The last step, a dousing of perfume or aftershave, applied with more enthusiasm than precision. The air is so thick with scent that your eyes water, and the local cats avoid the windowsill for days. You check your teeth, smooth your fringe, and give yourself a look that says, "We may not have it all together, but we're going out anyway." At last, you emerge into the hallway where your fellow flatmates are performing the same rituals. You share a knowing glance. The battle is over, the grooming is done, and if your hair survives the London fog, you'll consider it a miracle. You survived the pre-departure gauntlet. Time to face the night, with hair shellacked, stockings defiant, and just enough confidence to bluff your way through the first awkward hello. The household piggy bank, a jar shaped like Winston Churchill, coughs up a grand total of 3 shillings, a Canadian penny, and a mysterious button. You debate which will buy more, a bus ride, a pint, or entry to the local dance hall. Money is always tight, but tonight it's especially theatrical. The kitchen table becomes the site of an impromptu finance summit. Every housemate hunched over chipped crockery, pockets turned out, eyes narrowed in desperate hope. Someone's mum has sent a 10-bob note for emergencies, which is of course lost to history, last seen in the laundry or possibly, as legend has it, spent on fish and chips 3 Fridays ago. All that's left is the Churchill jar, its paint flaking, the little bulldog grimace on his face suggesting even Winston himself would call it a night in. You tip the contents onto the table with a solemnity usually reserved for ancient rituals or particularly challenging jigsaw puzzles. 3 shillings, coins that have changed hands through birthdays, borrowed lunches, and one memorable night involving a blackout and a very persuasive street magician. The Canadian penny is useless but makes everyone feel cosmopolitan. The button's origin is hotly debated. Is it from your best coat, a distant uncle's wedding suit, or a time before trousers had zippers? There's a moment of silence for the 2 missing her pennies, lost forever to the sofa's insatiable appetite. Math is required. Mental arithmetic, never anyone's strong suit, now becomes a game of what can we do without? The spreadsheet in your head starts calculating. Bus fare to the pub, bus fare to the dance hall, 1 round of drinks, and nothing left for snacks unless you're brave enough to try borrowing from the tip jar at the chippy. There are creative suggestions. What about walking, shot down immediately by the spectre of London's night air, foggy and full of sinister puddles? We could skip the first round and buy crisps at the dance met with scorn. We could pretend it's someone's birthday and hope for free cake, someone offers, though the last attempt ended with an impromptu rendition of Happy Birthday for a startled stranger and a hasty retreat. Someone proposes bartering the Canadian penny as an exotic artifact, but no one believes the barkeep will fall for that twice. The button is suggested as a token of good luck. After all, who needs all their clothes intact on a night like this? Eventually, with much sighing and shuffling, you pool what you have. The total, carefully counted and recounted, and once accidentally knocked to the floor and mixed with toast crumbs, is enough for the bare essentials. 1 bus ride, a shared pint, an entry to the dance hall if you promise not to mention last week's incident involving spilled cider and the band leader's trumpet. You debate the ethics of I owe us. Someone recalls the old wartime trick of forgetting your wallet and relying on the kindness, or more likely exasperation, of friends. But you all know the unspoken rule. If you go out, you pay your way, even if that way involves creative definitions of payment. Coins are divvied up into piles. Everyone pockets just enough for their own fare, plus a little reserve for emergencies, though what constitutes an emergency is a hot topic. One flatmate insists it's for a post-dance pie, another for phone money in case you get lost. Never mind that no one's actually sure where the nearest phone box is or whether it even works. Finally, as coats are shrugged on and shoes are laced, You clutch your small cache of silver and copper like the knight's golden ticket. The coins jingle in your pocket, a mix of hope and barely concealed terror. Outside, London's glow promises laughter and music, but only if you can make every penny stretch. You step into the evening, heart pounding with the thrilling uncertainty of being just solvent enough to have fun, or at least to have a story worth telling in the morning. After all, in 1950s London, the best nights out are the ones you can just barely afford. You step outside to find the bus stop already hosting half your street. The queue is an Olympic event, the bus will definitely be late, and someone inevitably lights up a cigarette directly upwind of your face. Your shoes slap against the pavement, squeak, 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 as you join the end of a human caterpillar stretching all the way down to the corner shop. The evening air is heavy with a mix of excitement, coal smoke, and whatever perfume Mrs. Bell from number 18 is wearing tonight. Something floral with a subtle hint of mothball. It's a familiar ritual. Every Friday, everyone on your block transforms into queue connoisseurs, trained in the fine art of pretending not to stare at their neighbours while inching imperceptibly closer to the curb. Queue etiquette is serious business in 1950s London. You mustn't cut in, no matter how late you are or how convincing your story about nailing Aunt and a bus timetable that only exists in theory. The person in front of you, armed with a newspaper and a thermos, gives you a curt nod, the kind that says, "We may be fighting for the same seat, but we'll do it with dignity." The teenager behind you sighs theatrically, radio pressed to his ear, leaking tinny skiffle and the occasional burst of static into the chilly night. The first 5 minutes pass in silence, a communal act of British endurance. The only sounds are distant traffic, the shuffling of impatient feet, and the occasional cough. Then the small talk begins to bubble up, weather naturally, followed by local gossip. "Did you hear about Mrs. Pierce's garden?" someone whispers. "Tragic, that frost." As the minutes drag on, the conversation turns to speculation about just how late the bus will be tonight. The consensus? Very. You shift your weight from foot to foot, fighting the slow creep of cold through your socks. The couple ahead start bickering about who forgot the umbrella. Farther up, a toddler breaks free and sprints in circles, blissfully unaware of adult queuing protocols. A little further down, a man in a trilby is holding court about the glory days of pre-war public transport, back when buses ran on time and everyone wore a tie, even the bus driver. As time ticks by, a new challenge emerges: second-hand smoke. Someone, always a self-declared outdoorsy type, decides this is the perfect moment for a cigarette. A breeze carries the smoke straight into your eyes, which water in protest, giving you the appearance of being moved by the sheer romance of waiting for public transport. You attempt to sidestep, but the queue's rules are as rigid as the crown jewel's security. You move, you lose your place. You check your watch, twice, just to be sure the hands haven't stopped out of sympathy. Each time, you're disappointed. A murmur runs up and down the line as red headlights finally appear in the distance. False alarm. It's a delivery van. The collective deflation is palpable. Someone jokes about setting up camp. Another person threatens, with mock solemnity, to walk to Soho and beat the bus there. Finally, after enough time to debate the finer points of rationing, politics, and whether or not the Beatles will ever catch on, the bus appears. It's moving with the weary resignation of a civil servant near retirement. The line compresses. Polite elbows are deployed. Your street's hierarchy is revealed. Mrs. Bell, of course, gets on first, bad hip dear, followed by everyone else in strict order of arrival and social standing. Boarding the bus is its own small victory. You clutch your precious coins, drop them into the fare box and head for a seat, if you're lucky, by the window, if not wedged awkwardly beside a man reading the Daily Mirror and humming tunelessly. As the doors close and the engine grumbles to life, the bus lurches forward, carrying you and your fellow queue warriors toward the next ordeal. The London night out, delayed but not defeated. In the end, the wait becomes part of the story, one more chapter in the long, strange ritual of making memories in 1950s London. You take a deep breath of genuine 1950s London air, part fresh, part coal smoke, part something you really hope isn't smog-induced existential dread. Visibility, low, fashion, gas mask optional. The city's famous pea super fog is rolling in, cloaking every lamppost and alleyway in a haze so thick you can practically taste it. You're not so much walking down the street as slowly dissolving into it, your outline blurring at the edges until you're less a person and more a vague suggestion. The glow from the shop windows turns the mist golden, but farther out the world slips to grey, then to black, and finally to a sort of philosophical uncertainty. It's the kind of weather where you could lose your own shoes just by looking away for a moment. Each breath is a full-body experience. Your nose twitches, your lungs sting, and your coat picks up a layer of soot so fine it might qualify as insulation. The taste is complicated, hints of last night's roast, a suggestion of wet dog, and the sort of chemical undertone that suggests London's air is really just a poorly run chemistry set. There's a subtle, unsettling perfume of industry, buses belching exhaust, bakeries burning the morning's bread, and the distant, hopeful scent of someone frying onions. Add a dash of the Thames at low tide, and you have a cocktail only the bravest would order. As you squint to make out the next 10 feet of pavement, shapes emerge and vanish with ghostly unpredictability. Shadows loom and retreat. Could be a postman, could be a lost corgi, could be the ancient spirit of King George V coming to remind you to wear a scarf. Your eyes water with each step, partly from the cold, partly from the smoke, and partly because the world seems so dreamlike you half expect to bump into Sherlock Holmes, a chorus line of chimney sweeps, or just the neighbour's cat, doubled in size by static electricity and dread. You tighten your scarf, an accessory in both the literal and medical sense. Those in the know have come prepared. Scarves wound 3 times around the face, gloves tucked under sleeves, hats pulled down to the eyebrows. Some people pass by with actual masks, remnants of the war kept just in case. They look half ridiculous, half enviable. You wonder if you could get away with a pillowcase tied around your mouth, then remember you'll need that pillow for sleeping off the bus fumes later. Navigating in the fog is an adventure best approached with patience and ideally a walking stick. Every puddle is twice as deep. Every curb is a potential ankle ambush, and every crossing a leap of faith. The streetlights glow as fuzzy, floating halos, illuminating nothing but their own confusion. You try to keep track of landmarks, a bakery here, a postbox there, but soon even the red double-decker buses appear out of nowhere, monstrous and solemn headlights cutting tunnels in the gloom. As you trudge along, you're not alone. Figures emerge at arm's length, surprise each other, exchange awkward hellos, then vanish into the soup. Strangers bond over the simple triumph of not being run over by a rogue delivery van, or falling into an unexpectedly deep puddle. There's camaraderie and confusion. Everyone is equally lost, equally sooty, equally determined to pretend this is perfectly normal. "Bit thick tonight, isn't it?" someone remarks, which in classic British fashion means I can no longer see my own knees. And yet there's a peculiar romance to it all. The city is muffled, its noise softened, its harsh edges hidden. In the fog, everyone becomes mysterious. Is that a jazz musician heading to a late set, or just a bloke who got lost after the pub? Are you heading toward your night's grand adventure, or simply circling the block in search of your own front door? One last cautious breath, coal smoke, damp wool, the ghost of last Christmas's pudding, and you press onward, eyes squinting, heart thumping, footsteps echoing softly in the world's strangest shroud. For all its hazards, the London fog is a rite of passage. If you can find your way to the pub through this, you can find your way anywhere. Probably. You finally squeeze into the local, where every surface is sticky, the wallpaper is older than the Queen, and the only thing colder than the beer is the look you get for ordering anything fancy. The pub, the Dog and Duck, the Royal Oak, the Something Arms, it almost doesn't matter what it's called. It's home base, the gravitational centre of every night out. You shoulder your way through a narrow door, which hasn't closed properly since 1949, and are immediately enveloped by a wall of sound. Laughter, the clack of dominoes, a burst of piano from the corner, the rising chant of someone belting out, "Roll out the barrel" with more enthusiasm than pitch. It's like stepping into another world, one where the rules are simple. If you can pay, you can stay, and everyone has an opinion about the football results. The air inside is a cocktail of stale ale, tobacco, and those mysterious pub crisps that haven't tasted of potato since the Suez Crisis. Every table is occupied by regulars, couples, a mysterious figure in the corner nursing a half pint and an ancient grudge, and that one dog who's more famous than the mayor. You make your way to the bar, where the counter is eternally sticky. You're not sure if it's the beer, spilled gin, or simply the collective hopes and dreams of every patron who stood here before you. At the bar, etiquette is an unspoken dance. You must catch the barman's eye without being too eager, place your coins in the correct order, and never, under any circumstances, attempt to pay with anything as modern as a 10-shilling note. The regulars eye you with suspicion. The staff size you up, calculating whether you're here for a quick half or likely to start a sing-along that will last until closing time. You nervously order a pint of bitter and, for a wild moment, consider asking for a cocktail. The barman's eyebrow climbs so high it nearly reaches the picture of the Queen Mum. You wisely settle for whatever's on tap, hoping it's not the same barrel that's been on since the coronation. You retreat to a sticky corner table, pint in hand, and take in your surroundings. There's always a group of old-timers swapping stories about the Blitz. You think this pub's cold now? Let me tell you about 42, a young couple arguing quietly over the jukebox, and a formidable matriarch holding court over her sherry, brooking no nonsense and absolutely no swearing in her presence. The dartboard has seen more action than most local cricket teams, and the landlord presides over the chaos with the weary majesty of someone who's heard every excuse for a late tab. If you're lucky, you score a packet of crisps, plain of course, with the mysterious blue salt packet inside. For the brave, there's the pickled egg, floating in its jar behind the bar like a science experiment no one dares interrupt. The evening unfolds in a gentle riot of spilled drinks, lost change, and triumphant toasts. Someone starts a round of dominoes, someone else starts a song. The only thing stronger than the ale is the sense of belonging. This is your lot for the evening, like it or not. As the hours slide by, the pub's warmth seeps into your bones. You swap stories with a stranger about rationing, the football scores, and who makes the best steak and kidney pie in the borough. The clock seems to slow. Outside, the fog presses against the glass, but inside, the world is loud, bright, and deliciously alive. You lose track of how many pints have come and gone, one for you, one for the group, one for the mysterious occasion nobody quite remembers, but everyone agrees is worth celebrating. Eventually talk turns to what happens next. Another pub, the dance hall, or maybe just one last round and a stroll home, pockets lighter and spirits lifted. Either way, you know this. The best nights in 1950s, London begin and end right here, in a place where the only thing stickier than the tables is the bond of shared laughter and another story to tell in the morning. At the bar, you attempt to order with dignity. The bartender gives you the look, half pity, half suspicion, before slamming down a pint that tastes vaguely of shoe leather and lost dreams. Ordering a pint in 1950s, London is not just a transaction, it's a performance, a test of nerves, and, in some pubs, an ancient blood sport. You sidle up to the bar, attempting to look like someone who knows the difference between mild and bitter, and who definitely isn't about to ask for anything as scandalous as a lager top. There is an unspoken language here, developed over generations and as complex as any royal protocol. The regulars each have their ritual: a tap on the counter, a well-timed cough, a mysterious sideways nod that seems to open some secret tab. You, meanwhile, hover with the uncertainty of a foreign dignitary at a village fete. The bartender, part referee, part therapist, part minor god, sweeps their gaze over you, weighing your soul and finding it a bit underseasoned. You clear your throat and, channeling the ghosts of thirsty Londoners past, state your order. A pint of bitter, please. There is a moment of silence, followed by the bartender's world-weary sigh. You've passed the first test. Only a fool would try to order a cocktail or, heaven forbid, a glass of white wine. That way lies ridicule and a seat at the table no one sits at, next to the coat rack and under the picture of the Queen that always hangs slightly askew. Your order is received, but the real challenge has just begun. The bartender moves with the slow grace of someone for whom time is optional, carefully pulling the pint, letting the amber liquid settle beneath a dense foam-topped head. You watch, trying not to flinch as they wipe the rim with a dubious rag and give you that all-knowing look, as if to say, "You sure you're up for this?" There's a ritual here. The careful placement of the glass, the single solid thud as it lands on the counter, the faintest suggestion that this is a test you're expected to fail. The crowd at the bar looks on, a silent jury of your would-be peers. You hand over your coins, not too quickly, which smacks of desperation, not too slowly, which hints at confusion. The bartender scrutinizes your change as if you might have slipped in a counterfeit farthing. There's a moment when you worry you've paid in Canadian pennies or worse, the mysterious button from the piggy bank at home. The pint is yours, but at a cost. The bartender's gentle, resigned headshake, the universal symbol for, well, everyone's got to start somewhere. You cradle your glass and take a tentative sip. The taste is a complex bouquet, hints of burnt toast, a note of something metallic, a background chorus of earthy bitterness, and the ever-present undertone of shoe leather. You suspect this pint has been waiting for a drinker since VE Day. Still, you nod appreciatively, as if this is exactly the flavour profile you were hoping for. The regulars seem to relax, satisfied that you've made the proper effort. Next to you, an old-timer offers sage advice. Best not ask what's in it, love. Beer's like London. Better if you don't look too closely. There's a round of knowing laughter. Another patron, emboldened by your willingness to swallow the unswallowable, slaps you on the back and asks if you fancy joining the next round. It's a rite of passage. Survive your first pint, and you're one of them. You take another sip, warming to the ritual, the camaraderie, and the faint hope that the next pint might taste more of hope and less of history. You lean against the bar, posture casual, and watch as the dance continues for the next nervous soul. The air is thick with stories and spilled ale. Here at the bar, you realise you don't just order a drink, you earn your place in the great, sticky, smoky tapestry of the London night. Every conversation in the pub starts with "back during the Blitz," and ends with a dubious anecdote about eating spam by candlelight. You nod sagely, as if you too have memories of hiding in an Anderson shelter. The air in the pub is thick with smoke and history. Everybody's got a story, and they're determined to tell it. As you sip your pint and let the warmth of cheap ale and questionable heating seep into your bones, you tune into the symphony of voices echoing off nicotine-stained walls. There's the older gentleman at the corner table, rolling a cigarette with military precision, who begins every tale with coarse, you wouldn't believe it now, and then launches into an account of chasing a runaway goat through the rubble of Clapham, only to be upstaged by a doodlebug overhead. 2 stools away, a woman in a tartan skirt is holding court over her half-pint of mild, describing in loving detail the art of blackout baking, how you could whip up a jam tart in a single candle's glow, provided you could find flour, jam, or the candle. Back then, she insists, tapping the bar for emphasis, you didn't need recipes, you just needed luck and a bit of powdered egg. There's a round of nodding, a few, I remember those days, and a brief heated debate over whether the best wartime treat was bread pudding or something called Walton pie, which everyone pretends to enjoy but no one can describe without a shudder. Further down, a man with a voice like a gravel road is spinning a yarn about smuggling bacon past ration inspectors. His eyes twinkle with mischief, though it's clear he was more likely to have been caught than crowned king of the black market. If you could slip a rasher into your shoe without squelching, you were practically MI5, he boasts, eliciting a wave of laughter. The bartender joins in. He's got his own stories, including the time someone tried to pay for a round with tea bags and a sincere promise to bring in sugar next week. As the tales grow taller and the pints shorter, the stories take on a surreal edge. A regular swears he once shared a shelter with a future beetle, though no one believes him. Another recounts a night when the pub's old radio caught a broadcast from New York, only for the news to be interrupted by a neighbourhood cat, which had somehow tangled itself in the aerial. You nod, smile and laugh in all the right places, trying to look like someone who's had to evacuate a flat by the light of an incendiary bomb, and who still has a favourite brand of gas mask. You realise, as the stories flow, that these memories are both survival strategy and social glue. For the regulars, the war is less a trauma than a badge of belonging, proof that they lived through something mad and came out with stories worth repeating. Every exaggerated memory, every dubious culinary tale, every groan-worthy punchline is part of the evening's ritual. The actual facts are as foggy as the windows, but the feeling is real. Camaraderie, resilience, and a stubborn refusal to let history get dusty and forgotten. Outside, the city might be changing, new tower blocks rising, cars replacing the rattling trams, but inside the pub, it's always a little bit 1941. The laughter is as warm as the Guinness, and the past feels closer than ever, just a story away. You wonder what tales you'll one day invent for your own grandchildren, perhaps about the time you survived a pint that tasted like shoe polish, or the night you navigated home in fog so thick you could hear the Thames but couldn't find your own shoes. For now you raise your glass along with the rest, salute the Blitz spirit, and soak in the collective nostalgia, savouring every absurd, comforting, exaggerated second of it. You're introduced to the regulars. Old Stan, who claims he once danced with Vera Lynn, Mrs. Peabody, keeper of the unofficial pub cat, and an entire family named the Pints, who appear to be permanently attached to the end of the bar. Settling into the pub's glow, you're quickly swept into the ancient ritual of meeting the local cast of characters, the lifeblood of every true London public house. Old Stan is first to greet you, shuffling over with a pint in one hand and a rolled-up newspaper in the other. His face is equal parts creased and cheerful, like a well-loved map of the city itself. Stan is a legend in his own mind, and possibly in his own postcode. You see that corner over there, he says, nodding to a patch of worn carpet by the dartboard. That's where Vera Lynn asked me for a dance in 42. Beautiful feet she had. Twinkle toes, they called me. You nod appreciatively, unable to confirm or deny, and Stan beams, satisfied that history has been properly recorded. Nearby, Mrs. Peabody presides over her territory like a benevolent duchess. She's not so much drinking her sherry as conducting a delicate negotiation with it. Her sharp eyes miss nothing. She knows everyone's business, everyone's drink, and, somehow, everyone's shoe size. Mrs. Peabody is also the unofficial guardian of Cyril, the pub cat, a scruffy, battle-hardened feline who occupies a high-backed stool and accepts ear scratches only on even-numbered days. He's been here longer than the wallpaper, she says with pride, and probably had fewer baths. She doles out advice with the same precision as she dispenses cat treats, and by the end of your first conversation, You find yourself promising to eat more greens and steer clear of the landlord's pickled onions. Then there's the pints, a family so entwined with the bar that you half suspect they've rooted themselves there. Mr. Pint, broad of shoulder and thin of hair, leads the charge, his laughter booming and infectious. Mrs. Pint, her cheeks as rosy as the best bitter on tap, keeps a watchful eye on the proceedings and an even closer one on her unruly brood. Their twin boys, known collectively as the half-pints, weave between stools, distributing crisp packets, gossip, and the occasional apology for an overturned ginger ale. It's whispered that the Pints have attended every quiz night since the war ended, and that one of them, no one remembers who, once drank the pub dry during a particularly memorable FA Cup final. As you navigate introductions, you discover that each regular has a story, and each story is a blend of truth, myth, and a dash of pure invention. Doris the barmaid claims to have once served Winston Churchill a pork pie. She was 3, it was in a dream, but details are unimportant. Alfie, who fixes radios and hearts in equal measure, swears he can tune in to Radio Luxembourg on a wet Tuesday just by adjusting his hearing aid. There's a quiet sense of community here, a sense that no matter how mad or mundane life gets outside, this motley crew will hold the line at the bar. You're offered a seat beside Mrs. Peabody and an unsolicited handful of pub peanuts. Old Stan demonstrates his legendary dart technique, which mostly involves missing spectacularly and blaming the draft. The Pints invite you to join their next game of dominoes, warning you, with deadly seriousness, that Mrs. Pint plays to win. You feel yourself absorbed into the group, your own quirks and stories joining the ongoing chorus of laughter, complaints about the price of beer, and running commentary on the landlord's hairstyle. It dawns on you that the pub's regulars are less patrons and more keepers of the flame. They remember every landlord, every refit, every time someone tried and failed to start a sing-along on a Tuesday. They are both the memory and the imagination of the place. Without them, the pub would just be a room full of sticky tables. With them, it's a living, slightly eccentric tapestry. As the night wears on, you realise you'll always remember your first meeting with the local legends, because they certainly will. And they'll remind you every time you walk through that door, whether you want them to or not. You eye the pickled eggs, dubious pork pies, and a bag of crisps older than your youngest cousin. Hunger battles fear. You lose, and bravely order something described only as special. There's a point in every night out when the contents of your stomach, last filled with something vaguely resembling dinner hours ago, begin a low, insistent protest. The pub's clamour fades and your senses sharpen, zeroing in on the battered menu slouched behind the bar. Your options are classic, if not exactly confidence-inspiring. Pickled eggs floating like pale orbs in a jar of cloudy brine. Pork pies sweating gently under the weight of time and fluorescent lighting. And a bag of crisps so stale you're convinced they've been passed down through several generations of bar staff. There's always something mysterious labelled the special, written in chalk and underlined with a flourish both threatening and hopeful. You glance around for moral support. The regulars offer shrugs and at your own risk smirks. Mrs. Peabody claims to have survived 3 specials and is still here to warn others. Old Stan, in a rare moment of lucidity, shakes his head and mutters, "Not since the summer of 53, but hunger overpowers caution." You approach the bar with all the bravado of a doomed explorer and declare, "I'll have the special." The barman gives you that little smile reserved for people about to make life-altering choices. He disappears into the back room, and you hear the telltale clang of a metal tin, the squeak of a knife that's seen better decades, and the soft, worrying plop of something unidentifiable being plated. You wait in mounting suspense, imagining every possible permutation. Will it be a pie, a pasty, or something entirely new to the culinary sciences? The plate arrives. On it sits what can only be described as a work of post-war improvisation. A slice of pork pie, crust valiantly holding back a tide of questionable jelly, a single pickled onion so sharp it could etch glass, and a biscuit that might once have been a cream cracker but is now best described as archaeological. The special is, indeed, special. It is also accompanied by a knife and fork so blunt you wonder if they're meant for self-defense rather than eating. You take your first bite, slowly, bravely. The pork pie's crust is as dense as local legend, the filling a blend of pork, salt, and something you sincerely hope is parsley. The jelly has the texture of melancholy. You chase it with a cautious nibble of the pickled onion, which launches a vinegar-fueled assault on your sinuses, and then crunch the ancient biscuit which echoes like a gunshot in the quiet corner. The crowd watches, equal parts impressed and horrified, and yet something remarkable happens. Whether through hunger, the power of suggestion, or sheer British stubbornness, you find yourself warming to the meal. It's not gourmet, but it's honest. You're eating what generations of Londoners have eaten, out of necessity, out of tradition, and perhaps out of a secret desire to tell stories later about the time you survived the special. The flavours are strong, simple, and somehow comforting. There's pride in getting through it. You nod at the barman, who gives you the barest hint of respect. You are, for tonight, one of them. Someone offers you a sip of their pint as a chaser, a much-needed palate cleanser, and the pub erupts in laughter as you recount the highlights of your meal. The biscuit was definitely older than me. The onion made me see through time. The pie, well, the pie had personality. Even Cyril the cat sniffs your plate, decides against it, and returns to his stool. By the time you're finished, you realise the gamble was worth it. The pub snack, like the pub itself, is about more than taste. It's a badge of courage, a ticket to another story, and if you're lucky, a lesson learned. Next time, maybe just stick with the crisps. But for now, you're full, you're laughing, and you're absolutely certain you'll never ask about the special again, at least until hunger comes calling next Friday. Someone suggests moving on to the dance hall. This triggers a 30-minute debate about bus routes, coat checks, and whether your shoes are up to the challenge. The suggestion drops into the conversation like a pebble into a pond, ripples of excitement, nerves, and protest spreading instantly. You can see the wheels turning behind every glassy stare at the table. There's always one self-appointed coordinator, armed with a dog-eared bus timetable and the misplaced confidence of a general plotting the D-Day landings. If we catch the 53 at 20 past, then change at Leicester Square, we'll be at the Savoy by past, unless the 38 is running late, which, let's be honest, it always is. This launches a heated crossfire of objections. Someone insists the 47 is faster. Another points out that the last time you all tried that route, you ended up in Bermondsey, lost and serenaded by a group of over-enthusiastic accordionists. The logistics spiral. What about the coat check? Someone asks, with the urgency of a person who has lost too many garments to the dark abyss of the dance hall cloakroom. Everyone glances nervously at their own battered coats and borrowed scarves. The tales begin. Last winter's scandal involving a missing Macintosh. The year before, when old Stan had to walk home in the snow wrapped in the pub dartboard. "I'm not risking my good hat," Mrs. Peabody proclaims. "That cloakroom's seen more theft than the Tower of London. Shoes are the next battleground." A chorus of pained groans rises as everyone looks down at their feet. Half the party is already blistered from the night's adventures. Someone admits to wearing 2 left socks. There's an unspoken agreement that the real test of British grit is not surviving the Blitz, but dancing 3 songs in post-war footwear. Mrs. Pint pulls out a battered tin of plasters to be rationed like gold. You attempt a quick assessment of your own shoes, still mostly holding together, provided you avoid sudden movements and all known forms of energetic dance. By this point, the original momentum has slowed to a crawl. There's talk of just staying put, ordering another round, and letting the fog outside settle the question for you. But there's always one brave soul, usually the youngest, or the one least likely to have to work tomorrow, who stirs everyone back into action. Come on, we'll regret it if we don't. The chorus grumbles but begins gathering scarves, straightening lapels, and checking pockets for enough coins to cover both bus fare and a possible emergency sandwich. The planning is not yet over. A heated subcommittee forms to debate the best entrance strategy. We need to arrive together or they'll make us queue twice. There are dire warnings about dancehall doormen. He's a stickler for proper attire. Remember last year when Alfie got turned away for having the wrong kind of tie? Old Stan, now fully invested, brandishes a flask and promises to keep spirits up if things get dire. Finally, after much herding of cats and sorting of hats, the group gathers by the pub door. The air is full of nervous anticipation, the heady mix of mild ale and bravado. You do one last check: coins for the bus, shoes for the journey, coat for the perilous cloakroom, and then you're off, swept out onto the foggy street in a gaggle of laughter and low-key panic. You may not have settled the coat check debate, or truly solved the mystery of the best bus, but you are united in the grand tradition of the British night out, bickering your way to joy. The dance hall awaits, somewhere out there, through the fog, at the far end of a complicated bus route and 1,000 tiny decisions you'll remember fondly in the morning. For now, you're together, you're moving, and you're determined to make it a night worth arguing about. The night bus arrives. It's hot, crowded, and smells powerfully of chips, perfume, and regret. You cling to the overhead strap as the driver takes each corner with the enthusiasm of a Grand Prix champion. Getting onto the night bus is less about boarding and more about entering a living, swaying ecosystem. The doors hiss open, and you're met with a tidal wave of humanity, a dense thicket of overcoats, lipstick-smeared cheeks, and shopping bags that may or may not contain contraband sandwiches. Elbows jostle as you wedge yourself into a narrow spot between someone humming Rock Around the Clock and a woman cradling a bouquet of wilting carnations like she's just won Miss World. The bus lurches forward with such violence that you're immediately thrown into intimate proximity with at least 3 strangers and the top half of a newspaper. Your arm extends upward, grasping the sticky strap with the desperate strength of a person determined to survive both motion sickness and unexpected social contact. Below you, feet shuffle as passengers practice an improvised form of crowd surfing. Step, pivot, hope for the best. Temperature control is a fantasy. The upper deck is a hothouse, windows fogged with the collective breath of 50 would-be revellers, coats flung open to reveal the full glorious spectrum of post-war British knitwear. Someone's removed their shoes for reasons known only to the divine, and the aroma that wafts up could fell a medium-sized ox. The lower deck is little better, packed with a boisterous football team, their laughter ricocheting around like loose change, and a small child asking, "Are we there yet?" Every 30 seconds with a dedication that borders on existential. You attempt to orient yourself, eyes watering from the double whammy of fried chips and overzealous rose perfume. The bus rocks left and right, brakes squeal, and every traffic light becomes an opportunity for passengers to perform synchronized sliding. A voice at the back launches into an off-key rendition of Daisy, Daisy, quickly joined by a chorus of strangers, because on the night bus, privacy is a privilege you surrendered at the curb. As you cling to the strap, you become an accidental confidant for nearby conversations. A woman in a fur-trimmed coat debates loudly about whether she should have said yes to that last dance. 2 lads swap horror stories about the dance hall cloakroom. "I'm telling you, my coat came back with an extra pocket, that's not normal." At your feet, a lost chip squashes underfoot, a tiny casualty of late-night ambition. Navigating the bus's shifting alliances is an art. Someone offers you a chip from a greasy paper cone. You decline politely, then accept on the second offer because British etiquette demands it. A kindly pensioner shares unsolicited wisdom about life, love, and the proper way to hold on to a double-decker seat. You nod sagely as if this is information you'll carry with you always. There are, of course, hazards. Every sharp corner is a test of balance. The driver seems to believe he's training for Le Mans, and at each swerve the entire bus groans in unison, except for the daredevil up front who's fallen asleep so deeply he'd sleep through the Queen's next speech. Luggage and shopping bags tumble, passengers lurch, and someone's hat is last seen rolling merrily toward the rear exit. Finally, your stop is announced with a clang and a cry of, "Next one's ours." You disentangle yourself, stumble toward the doors and spill out onto the pavement, grateful for the cool night air and the relative stillness of the earth beneath your feet. The bus pulls away, lights blazing, packed with Londoners on their own peculiar journeys, each clutching their regrets, their laughter, and the faint hope that the next stop brings them closer to something resembling home. You survive the London night bus, a rite of passage as essential as the fog, the pub, or the terrible pub snack. Your evening continues, slightly sweatier, considerably more experienced, and with a newfound respect for the physics of public transport and the resilience of the British spirit. You arrive at the dance hall only to find a queue that wraps around the block. Spirits are high, feet are not. There's something inherently British about lining up for pleasure. The queue outside the dance hall snakes past shuttered shops, lamp-posts, and the echoing promise of distant music. It's less a line and more a temporary community, equal parts anticipation, endurance, and barely concealed discomfort. You join the end, sandwiched between a girl in polka dots clutching a battered clutch purse and a man who's already removed his shoes and is standing proudly in socks, as if daring the night air to judge him. The pavement beneath your feet radiates the accumulated chill of a week's worth of drizzle. Everyone shifts from foot to foot, trying to find that elusive position where blisters don't make their presence known. Your friend tries a few experimental stretches, which only prompts nervous giggles from others. A couple in front of you perform a slow, shuffling waltz to keep warm, earning a few admiring glances and one or two eye rolls from the less coordinated in the queue. Despite the discomfort, the mood is buoyant. Every 5 minutes someone starts up a new round of "How much longer, do you think?" which is answered with shrugs, vague optimism, and occasionally desperate calculations about the time until the last bus home. The faint rumble of live music drifts out every time the hall's heavy doors swing open, momentarily electrifying the queue with excitement and a touch of envy for those already inside. Queue etiquette here is as sacred as the rules of cricket. No skipping, no complaining, too loudly, and if someone pops into the corner shop for a packet of mints or a bottle of pop, their place is religiously guarded by all. An unspoken solidarity emerges. If you suffer together, you might just dance together later. You exchange stories to pass the time, tales of legendary dance floor triumphs, last week's wardrobe malfunctions, or the infamous night the lights went out mid-foxtrot and half the crowd waltzed straight into the cloakroom. There's the inevitable coat debate. The cold seeps through your layers, but you all know the inside of the dance hall will be a hothouse of sweat, perfume, and hastily dabbed foreheads. Some brave souls drape their coats across their arms, shivering dramatically. Others have already resigned themselves to the cloakroom lottery, whispering horror stories about lost scarves and the time someone's hat came back smelling inexplicably of pickled onions. The queue advances in fits and starts, each step celebrated as if crossing a mountain pass. A few people give up and go in search of chips, promising to bring back enough for everyone, and returning with a single apologetic bag, the rest having been devoured as they waited for the crosswalk. You chew on a chip, the heat a small mercy against the evening's bite. Occasionally someone tries to cut the line, only to be met with a wall of collective outrage. Even the dance hall bouncer, built like a wardrobe and twice as polite, makes the rounds, offering dry jokes and a reminder that there's plenty of room on the dance floor if you can last the cue. As you near the door, the music grows clearer, shoes are retied, lipstick is reapplied, and spirits rally for the final push. A cheer erupts when your group finally crosses the threshold, as if you've survived an epic journey. In a way, you have. You step into the warmth, blinking at the light and bustle, feeling victorious. Your feet may have suffered, but your night out is just beginning in earnest. Proof, if any were needed, that sometimes the best part of an evening in 1950s London is simply surviving the wait together. After an eternity, you make it inside. You must now hand over your only warm coat to a cloakroom attendant who looks suspiciously like a minor royal. Will you ever see it again? Place your bets. Crossing the threshold into the dance hall feels less like entering a building and more like stepping onto the stage of a well-rehearsed play, one where the audience is both delighted and slightly resentful from the wait. The lobby's a flurry of scarves, buttons, and anxious glances. You can already feel the heat and the pulse of distant music, but before you even consider dancing, there is a ceremonial rite to perform, the surrendering of the coat. You join a second queue, shorter, but no less fraught. At the front sits the cloakroom attendant, immaculate in a pressed blazer, and with a countenance of polite, detached authority. There's an aura about them, a stiff upper lip, an eyebrow that can arch with royal gravity, and a gaze that could unnerve even the bravest of pensioners. You half expect them to ask for your coat, your full lineage, and a sworn oath not to sue if your hat comes back smelling of mothballs. Handing over your only warm coat is an act of pure faith. It's a good coat, or at least a good enough one, a faithful companion through years of English drizzle and cold, foggy mornings. You caress the lapels, perhaps for the last time, and glance at the token the attendant presents in exchange. A small disc of plastic bearing a number and the faint scent of existential risk. The attendant whisks your coat away to join the others, a sea of muted tweed and wool. Somewhere in the darkness of the cloakroom, you imagine, are relics lost to history, scarves that vanished in 1948, gloves that found new owners, and at least one legendary fur muff that's spoken of only in whispers. Your friends are in varying states of emotional distress. Some thrust their coats into the hands of the attendant and march away, resolutely pretending not to care. Others hesitate, making an inventory of every pocket and button, as if arming themselves against the inevitable moment of reunion. Or, more realistically, the discovery that their beloved overcoat now contains someone else's bus fare and a strange, unfamiliar scent. There's always one soul in the group who refuses to part with their hat, clutching it as though it contains the last secrets of the British Empire. The cloakroom is chaos managed by a single, unflappable attendant. The tokens are issued with solemnity. Woe betide the person who loses theirs. Stories circulate about the man who tried to collect his coat with the wrong number and spent 3 weeks in limbo, or the time Mrs. Peabody's scarf was returned having mysteriously acquired a monogrammed R and a phone number for someone named Reginald. Once divested of your outer layers, you're struck by the sudden exposure. Indoors, yes, but now at the mercy of fluorescent lighting and the collective heat of hundreds of dancers. The relief is tinged with anxiety. You find yourself casting backward glances toward the cloakroom every few minutes, as if the attendant might quietly melt into the wall with everyone's coats, never to return. You prepare to make your entrance into the main hall, slightly shrunken but lighter, forced to trust in fate, the honour of the dance hall staff, and the sturdy little plastic disc in your pocket. Your friends gather, exchanging nervous jokes about being reunited with someone else's raincoat or discovering a stowaway ferret in the pocket. A few brave souls recount tales of miraculous returns, of coats that vanished and reappeared 3 dances later, good as new, with a lucky shilling in the pocket. And so, thus unburdened and with all bets placed, you stride toward the lights and music, hoping your coat story doesn't end in the cloakroom twilight zone. In 1950s London, trusting the cloakroom attendant is a leap of faith as bold as any dance. Let the night begin. The band kicks off with a rousing waltz. You attempt to look cool while remembering which foot is left, avoiding someone's umbrella and dodging the wandering local Lothario. The moment has come. The lights in the dance hall dim just enough to make everyone look mysterious, or if you're honest, slightly washed out. And the band, perched on a stage draped in velvet that has seen more spills than Buckingham Palace's wine cellar, launches into their first tune of the night. The singer's croon echoes over the chatter as couples take to the floor, some with the assurance of seasoned professionals, others with the halting caution of people who've just remembered they haven't waltzed since the coronation. You hesitate at the edge of the dance floor, clutching your token of courage, a lukewarm lemonade, perhaps, or the firm handshake of a friend volunteering you as a partner. The opening bars of the waltz are both an invitation and a threat. Time to move, or be left behind. Summoning every ounce of poise, you step out and attempt to fall into the rhythm. Your partner, equally hopeful, grips your hand with just enough force to suggest a life preserver in high seas. Together, you shuffle through the opening steps, feet tentatively feeling out the territory. The waltz, when performed by the skilled, glides with effortless grace. In your case, it's more of a determined meander, 2 steps left, 1 right, and a bonus pivot to avoid colliding with Mrs. Peabody, who is waltzing solo with the confidence of a reigning champion. Around you, the dance floor is a sea of earnest faces and tentative smiles. The room sways and spins. The local Lothario, clad in a suit with lapels wide enough to double as sails, cuts through the crowd with a roguish wink, weaving dangerously close to your personal space. You sidestep with practiced skill, narrowly avoiding the pointy end of an umbrella wielded by a couple, using it as a dance prop, either out of creativity or because they genuinely expect it to rain indoors. The floor itself is a marvel of sticky spots and unpredictable slicks, so every step is a gamble. Someone near you executes a twirl that belongs in a much larger room, and you're forced into a graceful dodge that looks almost intentional. The band, blissfully unaware of the minor chaos below, swings into the next chorus, and the tempo quickens, adding a note of urgency to your shuffles. Your inner monologue becomes a running commentary. Left foot, right foot. Don't step on her toes. Don't bump into Mr. Pint's formidable knees. Smile, look relaxed. You catch your reflection in a gold-framed mirror, flushed, wind-blown, but undeniably part of the night's magic. Laughter bubbles up as someone misses a beat and turns it into a flamboyant bow, met with applause by onlookers and the approving nod of the band leader. As you settle into the rhythm, something clicks. You and your partner start to move together, if not with perfect elegance, then with a kind of synchronized hope. The outside world recedes. The aches in your feet are drowned by the music, the jokes, and the shared absurdity of it all. The band winds down, applause ripples across the hall, and you share a grin, half relief, half pride. The first dance ends with a flourish you'll swear was intentional. You leave the floor slightly breathless, elbow to elbow with your fellow survivors, already swapping stories about near misses and triumphs. And as you look back at the shifting, swirling crowd, you realize that, awkward steps and all, you've joined the centuries-old tradition of dancing your way through London's long, unpredictable nights. Suddenly jazz hits the speakers, someone yells jitterbug, and the floor becomes a battleground of flailing limbs, dropped handbags, and one unfortunate soul who takes out a chair with their knees. It happens in a heartbeat. The staid waltz dissolves, the bandleader grins with a wicked glint in his eye, and the dance hall explodes into syncopation. Trumpets blare. The double bass thumps with reckless glee, and the drummer launches into a manic swing, signalling the start of a jitterbug free-for-all. Those still clutching their lemonade or dignity scatter for the edge of the floor, while the bravest and most limber launch themselves into the fray. Your feet, still recovering from the waltz, are now expected to perform feats of acrobatics last seen at a circus, or, possibly, in a particularly enthusiastic rugby scrum. The jitterbug, in theory, is a playful dance of coordinated kicks and spins. In practice, on a crowded Friday night, it's a survival challenge. You barely have time to consider your next move before your partner whirls you into a spin so energetic you briefly see your own shoes flash past your eyes. Twice. The crowd takes on the energy of a shaken bottle of pop. A pair of regulars execute a routine so ambitious you're convinced they've trained for this since VE Day. Others, less experienced, manage a series of hops, bobs, and what can only be described as emergency improvisation. One couple flings themselves across the floor with wild abandon, only to part at the wrong moment, sending a stray handbag skittering underfoot. The handbag's owner pursues it valiantly, weaving through the throng like a determined salmon swimming upstream. A particularly enthusiastic dancer, caught up in the music, attempts a high kick and narrowly avoids decapitating a passing waiter. Someone else, arms flailing, loses their grip and sends a handkerchief sailing gracefully through the air, where it is caught by the local Lothario, who bows with a flourish and tucks it into his lapel. All around, shoes squeak, chairs are upended, and at least one innocent bystander finds themselves accidentally swept into a conga line with no idea how to exit. Then disaster, or legend, depending on perspective, strikes. A young man, knees pumping, takes the jitterbug's energy a touch too far, collides with a rogue chair, and goes down in a heroic tangle of limbs. The crowd gasps, then erupts into applause as he bounces back up, red-faced but grinning, adopting the classic British strategy of pretending it was all part of the plan. He's instantly handed a lemonade and declared a good sport by the matriarchs watching from the sidelines. You do your best to keep up, managing a few spins, some rapid footwork, and a series of improvisational moves inspired less by formal instruction and more by panic and the avoidance of low-flying handbags. At one point, you catch sight of your reflection in the dance hall mirror, cheeks flushed, hair wild, eyes bright. You look exactly as one should during a 1950s jitterbug, alive, slightly ridiculous, and having the time of your life. The music crashes to a close with a final triumphant cymbal flourish, leaving the dance floor littered with the occasional lost shoe, a lonely earring, and a communal sense of accomplishment. Everyone takes a breath, claps their hands, and picks up their scattered belongings. Laughter echoes around the hall. The stories of tonight's chaos are already growing in the telling. You return to your friends, out of breath and beaming, united in the knowledge that embarrassment shared is embarrassment halved. Tonight you jitterbugged, perhaps not with skill, but with heart, humour, and a whole lot of energy. And really, that's what dancing through a London night is all about. You make a dash for the lose, dodging couples, spilled drinks, and a queue longer than ration lines during the war. Inside, chaos, gossip, and at least one mysterious shoe. It begins with a subtle but unmistakable pang. Your bladder quietly but firmly reminds you of the lemonade, the warm pint, and that sip you took from someone else's cup during the jitterbug melee. You calculate your odds. Can you last another dance? Or is now your only chance before the next musical stampede fills the loos with half the population of the dance hall? The answer, as always, is a desperate dash between songs. Getting there is an event unto itself. You weave through clusters of flushed dancers recovering from the last set, sidestep a toppled chair, and nearly trip over a coat that has, by some miracle, migrated halfway across the hall. At the door to the restroom, you're met with the sort of queue normally reserved for breadlines and Beatles tickets. Spirits are mixed, some chatty, some sullen, all united by the common goal of relief. The queue inches forward, its members shifting from foot to foot in a slow, collective dance of discomfort. Someone starts humming "We'll Meet Again," which seems both hopeful and menacing. In line, you exchange whispered commiserations. They really ought to put in a second loo. Last week someone was in there for 20 minutes. I nearly used the sink. Time stretches, seconds drip by. You contemplate the wisdom of ever drinking anything again. At long last, your turn arrives. You push through the swinging door and step into a room only loosely governed by the laws of physics and decency. The mirrors are fogged, streaked with fingerprints and hopeful graffiti. For a good time, ask for Doris at the bar. The sinks overflow with abandoned combs, lipsticks, and a solitary sodden bobby pin. The air is thick with powder, perfume, and secrets, every square inch crowded with girls in various states of repair, men urgently fixing ties, and at least one person arguing with their own reflection. Somewhere near the corner, a knot of friends is locked in a heated debate over who stole whose lipstick. That shade never suited you anyway, Rita. There's a row of girls sharing a single compact dabbling powder across their noses and offering unsolicited advice about romance, shoes, and the dangers of the dance floor. In the gents, it's less lively. Just the quiet sound of running water, a few half-hearted jokes about football, and an older man giving a lecture on the virtues of a sturdy shoe. Then there's the shoe, a single elegant pump resting atop the radiator as if waiting for its owner, or a prince to reclaim it. Speculation runs wild. Was it lost in the great jitterbug incident, or left behind in a hasty escape? Someone suggests it's a signal, like a secret spy code, but most agree it's simply the inevitable casualty of a night lived at full speed. You freshen up, or at least do your best, given the state of the soap, one tiny, slippery sliver left, and squeeze past the queue for the mirrors. You check your hair, reapply lipstick if you have it, or borrow some from a friendly stranger who insists this one goes with everything. There's a conspiratorial sense of camaraderie. Everyone's been here before. Everyone's in this together. For a few minutes, the bathroom is a haven. Safe, warm, alive with stories, jokes, and a quick exchange of gossip about who's kissing whom behind the cloakroom. You step back into the dance hall lighter, bolder, and armed with fresh rumours and a sense of accomplishment. The loo may be chaos, but it's the sort you'll remember fondly, and probably laugh about next week when you spot that same mysterious shoe still waiting, still unsolved. You squeeze into the lounge to reapply makeup or splash cold water on your face. You're instantly adopted by a pack of chatty strangers, half of whom have opinions about your shoes. The lounge is less a place and more a swirling microclimate, a thick, fragrant haze of perfume and cigarette smoke, punctuated by laughter, the tinkle of powder compacts, and the reassuring splash of water from a basin that never quite stops running. It's the unofficial embassy of the dance hall, a place where peace treaties are forged, secrets traded, and friendships struck on the strength of a shared bobby pin or emergency stick of chewing gum. No sooner have you edged your way past the curtain than you're enveloped in a whirl of voices. The first to greet you is a tall, red-lipped woman with the air of a film star and the self-appointed authority of a school headmistress. Darling, you must sit. That colour suits you, but you need a touch more powder here, trust me. You're steered into the only available chair, a rickety throne wedged between a clutch of young women in brightly coloured skirts and two older ladies dissecting the local gossip like it's the football pools. You fumble for your compact, but it's already been commandeered by a new friend. Her name's Mavis. She works in the biscuit factory, and she has strong feelings about what constitutes a proper handbag. Before you know it, a small but effective committee has assembled to debate the state of your hair, whether your hem should be taken up an inch, and the relative merits of shoe polish, versus a strategic dab of Vaseline. I always say, if the Queen can pull off a sensible heel, so can we, one lady insists, while another sighs that at least you have the sense not to wear suede in this weather. Across the room, a knot of girls crowd around the tap, cooling their wrists and whispering about who's snogging whom out back. Their laughter bubbles up and spills across the lounge, infecting everyone with a fizzy sense of conspiratorial joy. In the corner, two men, one fixing his tie, the other reading the racing results, offer solemn nods and occasional commentary, like a Greek chorus in high-waisted trousers. In the gents, it's a similar if slightly quieter affair. Discussions of pomade, razor burn, and the near-religious importance of never ever borrowing another man's comb. Within minutes you find yourself swapping advice with strangers on blisters, eyeliner, and the quickest escape routes should you spot an ex-partner or an overzealous dance partner lurking in the hall. Someone loans you a spritz of perfume, just a dab, it's French, while another offers half a stick of Wrigley's and her unsolicited theory that you'd look fabulous in navy blue. There's talk of last week's disaster. Someone's heel broke mid-tango, prompting a rescue mission involving a pocket knife and 3 yards of elastic. These are the stories that form the glue of dance hall camaraderie. Time in the lounge runs differently, an endless parade of introductions, tips and giggles. In the mirror you see your reflection transformed not just by fresh lipstick and a smoothed brow, but by the easy confidence that comes from being part of a cheerful temporary tribe. The lounge, you realise, isn't just a pit stop. It's the heart of the hall, a safe haven for regrouping, recharging and realising that everyone here, in one way or another, is making it up as they go along. You emerge back into the bright lights of the dance floor, cheeks flushed and spirits high. Maybe your shoes still pinch and your eyeliner's a little wonky, but you're richer by 5 friends, 4 bits of advice, and a phone number scribbled on a cocktail napkin. In 1950s London, the best nights out are made not just on the dance floor, but in the smoky, swirling refuge of the lounge, where strangers become allies, and every laugh is a small victory over the night. It's after midnight, and the siren song of the local chippy calls. You stagger in, eyes watering from the smell of vinegar and fried mystery. You order chips with everything because you can. The world outside the chip shop is muffled and cold, but the inside blazes with fluorescent light and the perpetual sizzle of bubbling oil. It's a portal to a parallel universe, one governed by salt, grease, and the unspoken understanding that calories consumed after midnight are, in fact, medicinal. The door jingles behind you as you join the throng of late-night adventurers, dancers, bus drivers, and the occasional lone philosopher, all united in their hunger and questionable decision-making. You shuffle forward, blinking back tears not from emotion, but from the sheer atmospheric power of malt vinegar mingling with hot steam. The air is thick, so thick that you can almost chew it. Everything you own now smells faintly of fried fish, and your hair will carry that perfume until next Tuesday, regardless of how many times you try to wash it out. The menu, painted in fading block letters above the counter, offers a dizzying array of possibilities: cod, haddock, saveloy, pickled onions, mushy peas, curry sauce, and the ever-elusive scraps. The crunchy, mysterious bits swept from the bottom of the fryer and venerated as late-night treasure. You and your friends make your choices with the focus and intensity of people choosing lottery numbers. Chips with everything, you declare, and nobody questions your wisdom. There's an art to ordering at the chippy. The regulars know the lingo. Open or wrapped? Salt and vinegar? Anything else, love? You answer in a daze, nodding at every question, eager for whatever is on offer. Coins clink on the counter, hands exchange brown paper parcels still glistening with oil, and somewhere behind the fryer a radio hums out the latest skiffle tune, slightly distorted by static and batter crumbs. Waiting is part of the ritual. You stand shoulder to shoulder with strangers, united by anticipation and the shared fatigue of the city's long night. Someone cracks a joke about the portion sizes. They're getting smaller every year, I swear. While another tells a story about the time old Stan tried to fry a Mars bar and nearly brought down the national grid. There's a camaraderie here, a sense that you're all in this together, regardless of whether you're after a battered sausage or just the cheapest cup of tea in Soho. At last, your chips are ready, a glorious mound, golden and glistening, doused liberally with vinegar and salt, hotter than the surface of the sun. You accept them reverently, knowing they will heal all wounds, blisters, bruised pride and broken hearts alike. With greasy fingers and communal glee, your group finds a spot on the nearest curb or bus stop bench. The outside world is cold, but inside your paper parcel, it is warm, safe, and deliciously absurd. The first bite is always the best. Crisp edges, fluffy centres, the tang of vinegar making your lips tingle. There is no shame here, only the pleasure of food at its most honest. A friend passes around a battered cod fillet. Another insists you try the curry sauce. It's an acquired taste, mostly acquired after midnight. Someone inevitably drops a chip, and it is memorialized with appropriate solemnity. As you eat, you recount the night's adventures, awkward waltzes, wild jitterbugs, mysterious shoes. You toast with bottles of Tizer, laugh at nothing and everything, and watch as London's late-night characters drift in and out of the shop, each clutching their own paper-wrapped prize. By the time you're licking the last grains of salt from your fingers, the world seems softer, kinder, and full of possibility. The chippy isn't just a pit stop, it's a ritual, a comfort, a small rebellion against the ordinary. It's after midnight in 1950s London, and you've conquered the greasy gauntlet. Tomorrow you might regret it, but tonight, chips with everything feels exactly right. Outside, huddled on the curb, you make new friends for life or possibly just for the next 10 minutes. Romance is possible, provided you don't drop your chips on someone's shoes. The London night air nips at your ankles, but you barely notice. The warmth of the paper-wrapped chips, the laughter of friends, and the buzz from the dance hall all insulate you from the cold. The curb outside the chippy has become a democratic haven. Everyone's equal here, whether you're in a moth-eaten dinner jacket or a polka-dot dress, so long as you have enough change for a small bag of chips and the ability to laugh at your own misfortune. This is the hour when strangers become confidants with surprising speed. You pass around chips and stories, exchanging names you'll forget by morning and secrets you'll remember forever. There's an infectious intimacy to the night. Every conversation feels a bit softer, every smile just a bit brighter, as if the sodium from the chips has seeped into everyone's personality. Romance naturally hovers in the air, thick as the scent of vinegar. Someone offers you their last chip, an act bordering on a marriage proposal in chippy culture. You accept with mock solemnity, exchanging grins in the flickering light of a distant street lamp. Elsewhere, a couple sits shoulder to shoulder, hands almost touching, talking about favourite bands and terrible bus drivers. You overhear the beginnings of a love story. I was going to order the Savoy, but then I saw you and thought, no, tonight I'll try my luck. The curb becomes a confessional. Confessions of lost shoes, missed buses, and the sort of existential questions only late-night carbohydrates can inspire. Do you think anyone's ever actually enjoyed pickled eggs? Your friends are already planning future outings with people whose names you barely caught. You pledge eternal friendship to the girl with the pink scarf and the boy who claims he once saw Buddy Holly outside the Odeon. You'll all be strangers by morning, but tonight, you're an unbreakable team. Of course, danger lurks with every mouthful. There is the ever-present peril of dropping chips on your own lap, or, even worse, on someone else's best shoes. One misjudged gesture, and you're branded the villain of the evening, until someone else spills vinegar on their trousers and the crowd's attention shifts. The rule is clear. Chips lost to the pavement are mourned briefly, and then immediately forgotten in favour of another round of communal storytelling. The night is peppered with moments of comic heartbreak. A would-be suitor, emboldened by cod and curry sauce, attempts a grand romantic gesture, offering the largest chip in the bag, only to see it tumble slow motion to the gutter. There is laughter, gentle teasing, and the kind of encouragement only strangers can offer. Better luck next time, mate. Try a pickled onion. Somewhere, someone breaks into song badly, but with such passion that the rest of you join in, harmonizing as best you can with mouths half full of potato. As the chips disappear and the paper parcels are folded up, there's a hush. The city seems to pause, holding its breath, as if acknowledging your tiny temporary community. It's a quiet camaraderie. Hearts a little lighter, feet a little sorer, everyone cradling the memories of dances danced, jokes told, and chips, cold but precious, shared under the sodium glare. In the end, whether you found love or just found the bottom of your chip bag, you feel richer for it. The curb is abandoned for the next group, the romance of the night preserved in smudged lipstick, potato crumbs, and the faintest hope that you'll meet again, same time, same place, next Friday. Because in 1950s London, sometimes the best love stories start not with roses, but with vinegar, salt, and cold chips. You realise the last tube leaves in 5 minutes. Sprinting ensues. Only the strong or the lucky will make it. You heroically slide into a carriage just as the doors close. It always sneaks up on you. One moment you're basking in the afterglow of fried food and new friendships, and the next, a shriek. The last tube's in 5, cuts through the group like a wartime siren. Suddenly, your cosy patch of curb transforms into the starting line of a cross-city marathon, with every Londoner scrambling to avoid the ignominy and expense of the night bus, or, worse, a long walk home in shoes that have already outlived their natural lifespan. The dash begins with a flurry of frantic goodbyes. Scattered chips fly. Purses are snapped shut. Scarves are reclaimed from friendly strangers, and a cold wind whips through as you all bolt toward the station. The sprint is ungainly but determined, knees and elbows churning, shoes slipping on rain-slicked pavement, hearts pounding with the peculiar combination of panic and potato. You navigate the city's nighttime labyrinth like a slightly confused but admirably motivated detective. Past the taxi rank, past the couple locked in a goodbye embrace that has clearly surpassed its time limit, past a trio of buskers who cheer you on with a hastily improvised tune. Traffic lights are mere suggestions at this hour. You dart across the street with reckless abandon, weaving through fellow fugitives in a symphony of clattering heels and wild laughter. The glow of the underground sign is a beacon of hope. Down the steps you go, nearly tripping on the handrail, hair wild and breath-forming clouds in the chill. The station is nearly deserted except for your fellow sprinters, some breathless, some resigned, all united in their common goal. Do not, under any circumstances, be left on the wrong side of the city. The tube's signature smell, part dust, part history, part something faintly electrical, greets you like an old friend. The announcement echoes off the tiles. The last train is now arriving. A communal gasp. You fumble for your ticket, hand trembling, praying you haven't dropped it with your last chip. Someone in your party heroically wedges their foot in the closing barrier, risking life, limb, and stern disapproval from the attendant, who is absolutely done with everyone's nonsense for the night. You make the leap, bag in one hand, dignity in the other, and slide through the narrowing doors, landing unceremoniously in the carriage with a dozen other triumphant survivors. The doors hiss shut. You did it. There are cheers, applause, and at least one impromptu group hug. Inside, the tube is its own microcosm of victory and exhaustion. Shoes are kicked off with groans of relief, jackets are shrugged off, and everyone shares a breathless rundown of how close they came to disaster. I thought I'd lost my scarf. Did you see old Stan nearly trip over the escalator? Remind me never to eat that many chips before running again. The camaraderie is as thick as the air, and for a moment, the boundaries between strangers and friends dissolve in shared relief. There's always a philosopher on board, declaring this to be the real London spirit, as if missing the last tube were a rite of passage, and not just the result of 3 pints and a dance floor full of distractions. Someone serenades the carriage with a song, and others join in, their laughter echoing down the rattling tunnel. The tired old tube rattles on, carrying you homeward, past familiar stations, past empty platforms, past the city's sleeping heart. As the train slows for your stop, you gather your belongings and your wits. You're battered, breathless, and still slightly salty from the chips, but you made it. You step out into the quiet station, grateful, victorious, and already nostalgic for a night that almost left you stranded but instead carried you all the way home. Because in 1950s London, the final tube isn't just a train, it's the last adventure of the night, and you rode it with style. Disoriented, you emerge from the station, convinced your street has moved since you left. Every lamppost looks familiar, every alley is full of cats and existential questions. The world outside the tube station is not the one you remember. You step into the murk of a London night, the fog hanging so thick it's less weather and more lifestyle. The station's bright lights dissolve behind you, replaced by a patchwork of gas lamps, puddles, and the suspicious rustle of unseen creatures. You pause on the pavement, heart beating in time with your footsteps, squinting into the gloom and trying to summon memories of street names that now sound as fictional as Narnia. It's late, so late that the city has shed its bustling skin and become a quiet, echoing labyrinth. Every shadow lengthens into possibility. The terraced houses you pass all blend into one another, identical doorsteps and letterboxes hiding behind curtains drawn tight against the cold. The lamps, haloed in the mist, seem to taunt you with their sameness. Didn't you just walk past that one? Or is this some sort of municipal prank? Even the pavement seems to slope differently, as if the city itself has shifted beneath your feet just to keep you guessing. You set off with a kind of confidence that can only come from being truly, deeply lost. There's a strange comfort in wandering through the fog. Your senses sharpen, your imagination runs wild, and every alley cat becomes both companion and possible informant. You greet the first feline you see with a polite nod and a whispered plea for directions. It blinks, yawns, and promptly disappears into a hedge, leaving you to question whether it was ever there at all. Your shoes, rebellious from a night of dancing, now squelch against the wet pavement, their rhythm echoing into the emptiness. Somewhere nearby, a bottle clinks, a window creaks, and the distant wail of a siren melts into the endless grey. You begin to wonder if you're not just lost in London, but in time itself, adrift between eras, with nothing but fog and memory for company. Each crossroads presents a philosophical challenge. Left toward the blinking street lamp, right toward the suspiciously cheerful window, or straight ahead into the unknown. You try to follow the logic of the route you took earlier, but everything feels inside out. The city is a maze designed by a committee of tired postmen and very ambitious fog. The streets grow stranger as you go. A man in a bowler hat passes by, whistling a tune that sounds suspiciously like God Save the King. He tips his hat and you nod back, as if these midnight encounters are perfectly normal. A group of cats, or possibly the same cat multiplied by the night, emerges from an alley, observing you like a council of wise if indifferent judges. Every so often, a thought floats through your mind. Does anyone ever make it home, or do some simply become legendary figures haunting these mists, forever searching for the right garden gate? You attempt to use landmarks to navigate. Wasn't there a bakery here this morning? Has that postbox always been bright blue? Is this your own front step, or a parallel universe in which all houses have the same chipped tile and one mysteriously absent milk bottle? Your mind wanders between memories and possibilities. Is your neighbour's house really next to the grocer's, or have you always been living in a city that rearranges itself on a whim? Eventually, slowly, wonderfully, you stumble upon a sight so sweet it might as well be Camelot. Your own front gate glistening with dew and slightly off kilter. You let out a sigh, pat yourself down for keys, always the last adventure of the night, and slip inside, the fog finally relinquishing its hold. You survive the gauntlet home, your story one of perseverance, mild confusion, and the unbreakable human urge to find your way, even when the city conspires to keep you lost. In 1950s London, every journey home is an epic, every street is a mystery, and every night ends with the quiet triumph of making it back through the fog. Back home, the party isn't quite over. Someone puts the kettle on. Tea and toast appear as if by magic, and the night's events are dissected with forensic precision by everyone who made it back alive. There is a special reverent silence as shoes are kicked off in the entryway, less from respect and more because nobody's feet can survive another step. Coats are draped over chairs, handbags dumped in corners, and someone, usually the one who still has the energy to stand, takes charge of the battered kettle, setting it to boil with the focus of a surgeon prepping for a major operation. A tray of mismatched mugs is produced from the depths of the cupboard, each bearing the faded logo of a long-defunct company or a seaside holiday that ended in sunburn and disappointment. The kitchen becomes the new dance hall. Here, the music is the gentle whistle of the kettle, the percussion is the thunk of knives spreading butter, and the lighting is a single flickering bulb that makes everyone look like they're starring in a particularly introspective episode of a soap opera. Someone slices the bread thick and wonky because precision is for earlier in the evening, while another rummages through the larder for jam, marmalade, or even a rare sighting of chocolate spread. The group assembles around the table, elbows and knees knocking together, cheeks flushed from cold and laughter. Tea is poured with the ceremony it deserves, the pot wrapped in a faded cosy milk and sugar dispensed according to ancient and sometimes contradictory household law. One friend demands their tea strong enough to stand a spoon in, while another requires so much milk it's essentially a hot milkshake with a hint of tannin. The conversation is a rambling post-mortem of the night, each dance move analysed, every social gaffe recounted with brutal honesty and increasingly wild hand gestures. Who stepped on whose toes during the jitterbug? Which member of the party lost their shoe? And how did it end up on the piano? Did old Stan really dance with a stranger's umbrella? Or was that just the result of too much ginger beer? Every memory is dissected and retold, layered with embellishments that will grow in size and boldness each time the story is shared. No one is safe from gentle mockery, especially not those who heroically misremember key events. As the tea flows and the toast is slathered in whatever can be found, margarine, jam, a suspicious spread labelled meat paste, the group's bravado gives way to a gentler mood. The outside world is dark and silent. The only evidence of the city beyond is the occasional hum of a distant car and the comforting tap of rain against the window. This is the hour when existential questions start to bubble up. Did you make the right choices tonight? Will you ever find true love, or at least a bus that runs on time? Is there meaning in a night spent flailing on a dance floor, or does it all dissolve in the morning light? Someone suggests a second round of toast, and the group, united by exhaustion and the desire to put off Monday for just a bit longer, unanimously agrees. The slices emerge a little burnt, and nobody cares. Someone hums a tune from the dance hall, Another launches into a spirited debate about the best biscuit for dunking. There's a shared understanding that these are the moments you'll remember most, when the adventures are over, but the company lingers, warm and sustaining as the tea. Eventually eyelids droop, yawns ripple around the table, and the party quietly disperses. Blankets are claimed, sofas converted to makeshift beds. You slip beneath the covers, comforted by the hum of the kettle still cooling and the distant echo of laughter. In 1950s London, the night doesn't really end. It simply winds down, softened by tea, toast, and the gentle realization that sometimes the best part of any adventure is coming home. At last you collapse into bed, hair smelling of smoke, feet battered, heart full of stories. The world spins gently as you drift into sleep, serenaded by the distant sound of a jazz band and the haunting memory of that one truly terrible pork pie. It's a moment of exquisite relief. The mattress sags but feels like heaven. The scratchy blanket might as well be silk. Your body, aching in places you didn't know you had, sinks gratefully into the cool sheets. Shoes are kicked off, or simply abandoned somewhere en route to bed, and your arms and legs are suddenly 10 times heavier, as if gravity itself has grown sentimental and wants to tuck you in. The room is shadowy, moonlight smudged across the walls, and everything is still. All around, the city sighs, the creak of old pipes, a muffled car horn in the distance, the comforting clink of cups being washed in the kitchen by a lingering night owl. Your mind races with the residue of the night, the blur of spinning dancers, the sharp tang of vinegar on chips, the endless, misty walk home through streets that seem to rearrange themselves just for fun. Your feet, those loyal, suffering martyrs, throb gently beneath the covers, each blister a small badge of courage. You stretch your toes, wincing at the memory of wayward heels, sticky dance floors, and the wild improvisation that was the jitterbug. You promise your feet a rest and possibly new shoes, and then immediately doubt you'll remember either by morning. There's a pleasant fuzziness to your thoughts as they wander through the evening's adventures. Faces of friends, old and new, drift by, voices mingling with music in a dreamlike jumble. You replay your finest dance move, the one you executed with accidental grace, and the less glorious moments, tripping over a chair, mistaking someone's coat for your own, dropping a chip on someone else's sock. Each memory arrives softened at the edges, already acquiring the golden glow of legend. Somewhere in the twilight between waking and sleep, your senses conjure the lingering smell of the pub, a faint smoke, a trace of beer, and the ghostly whiff of that pork pie, as if your subconscious wants to make absolutely sure you never forget. You half expect to hear the barman's disapproving grunt or Mrs. Peabody's cat purring by your feet. Instead, it's the gentle night noises, rain on the window, the slow tick of a clock, a distant laugh from the street that cradle you closer to sleep. You lie on your back, eyes fluttering closed, and the room spins ever so slightly, a slow waltz to match your heartbeat. The day's troubles feel impossibly far away, replaced by the warm satisfaction of having lived fully, if a bit chaotically. You imagine you're still at the dance hall, the band playing one last song, your friends circling you, the world twirling in time to a tune only you can hear. As your breathing deepens, you realize how grateful you are for small mercies, the resilience of your shoes, the generosity of strangers, the sweetness of shared biscuits and laughter. You drift, weightless, through memories, reliving every shimmer of light on the dance floor and every giggle in the lounge. And so, at the end of a long, glorious and faintly ridiculous night, you surrender to sleep. The city outside continues its quiet shuffle, but you are safe and still, afloat on a tide of jazz, kindness, and toasted breadcrumbs. Tomorrow will bring new adventures, new blisters, and perhaps a different kind of pie. But for now, you rest, dreaming the dreams of 1950s London, swirling, bright, and forever tinged with the taste of digestive biscuits and the echo of a distant song. At some point you find yourself cornered by the pub landlord, a person who seems to know everyone's business, everyone's debts, and the exact date your Aunt Doris tried to sing God Save the Queen upside down after too many baby chams. His advice is cryptic, his accent impenetrable, and you suspect he hasn't left his post since 1946. The landlord is an institution in his own right, a broad-shouldered silhouette illuminated by the glow of mismatched bar lamps, with a voice that rumbles like distant thunder and a memory as sharp as a tacksman's pencil. He stands sentinel behind the bar, glass in hand, polishing it with a tea towel older than the building itself. No matter where you try to hide, you always catch him watching you with the wry, all-seeing gaze of someone who's witnessed every heartbreak, every minor miracle, and every ill-advised limerick recited within these sticky walls. Your first encounter is almost ceremonial. You step up for a refill, only to find the bar already knows your order. He's poured it, with a knowing wink, before you've even managed to clear your throat. On the house, he mutters, then fixes you with a stare that says, "But I'll remember if you don't buy the next one." His words are cryptic, delivered in an accent that bounces between Cockney, Yorkshire, and somewhere suspiciously European. You nod, smiling politely, while your mind races to decode whether he just gave you the weather report or the secrets of the universe. He knows things. He knows that Mrs. Peabody is partial to a drop of gin in her lemonade, that old Stan never pays his tab on Thursdays, and that the pints, for all their rowdy laughter, have a soft spot for the stray dog that sometimes wanders in from the alley. He refers to everyone by nickname: Trouble, Sunshine, Your Majesty. The latter, you later learn, is reserved for anyone who's ever managed to clear the dominoes board in 3 moves or less. When the night is quiet and the pub settles into the gentle buzz of a post-midnight lull, the landlord likes to share advice. Proverbs that sound suspiciously made up but feel undeniably true. Never trust a man who orders shandy after midnight. A clean bar mat means an empty till. If you see the cat by the fire, expect rain in the morning and bad luck at darts. His tone is always half joking, but his eyes twinkle as though he's seen these prophecies come true more often than not. Occasionally he'll lean in closer and share tidbits that leave you wondering if he's psychic or simply bored. Heard you're sweet on that redhead from the biscuit factory. Tell her you like foxtrot, she's a sucker for a 3-step. Or with a sly grin, you'll want to steer clear of the pickled onions tonight. Trust me, you heed the warnings. You start to believe he really does know things, possibly everything. Regulars claim he hasn't left his post since the last Christmas blackout. Some swear he sleeps standing up behind the bar, waking only when a glass is empty or a fight breaks out over the jukebox. There are legends. The night he predicted the landlord 2 pubs over would lose his keys, and then produce them from behind his own bar. The time he sorted out a lover's quarrel with just a single word, dance, and the occasion he guessed the exact number of coins in the charity jar, down to the last halfpenny. By closing time, you realise that being noticed by the landlord isn't just a rite of passage, it's an initiation into the strange warm heart of the pub. You leave the bar slightly lighter of pocket but heavier with stories, feeling as though you've been given a password to a secret society. And as you step out into the cool night air, you know he'll be there next week, glass in hand, ready with a greeting and a new piece of advice. Whether you understand it or not is another yarn. As the evening drags on, you wander past street vendors hawking food so mysterious even they can't explain the contents. You're offered a paper cone of whelks, a scorched chestnut, and something described only as saveloy. You buy one of each, instantly regretting 2. The city after midnight is a carnival of temptation and risk, no place more so than the ramshackle row of vendors set up on rain-slicked pavements, each one under a crooked awning, illuminated by a solitary buzzing bulb. There is the Welk man, wrapped in a coat older than Parliament, standing behind his battered cart. His voice rings out, fresh from the river, which, considering the Thames's reputation, is more threat than promise. Still, you can't help yourself. There's something intoxicating about the prospect of eating shellfish in a foggy city miles from the sea. He scoops up a generous portion, drops them into a paper cone, and douses them with vinegar until the whole concoction steams like a laboratory experiment gone sideways. Next door, a chestnut vendor tends his tiny brazier, occasionally jabbing it with a stick and blowing on the coals as though urging on a reluctant campfire. He thrusts a handful of blackened chestnuts your way. The aroma is undeniably festive, if you ignore the faint scent of singed glove. You juggle the piping hot nuts from hand to hand, trying not to think about how many winters those coals have survived. The first bite is gritty, smoky, and oddly comforting, a taste that somehow conjures up the memory of your grandmother's parlour, damp socks and public transport all at once. And then there's the saveloy, spoken of in whispers, handed over in grease-stained paper, its exact composition a closely guarded secret, perhaps even to the man selling it. Meat, he says with a knowing wink or something like it. You look down at the pink glistening sausage, debating whether bravery or hunger is driving your hand to your mouth. A cautious bite reveals a taste that is, frankly, more mystery than meal. Spices, salt, a texture reminiscent of rubber boots, and the ineffable feeling that you've just eaten a small part of London's past, preserved for posterity in a natural casing. These late-night delicacies, dubious though they are the glue of the city's after hours. You're joined by a motley crew, other revellers in bow ties and bedraggled heels, a doorman sneaking his own snack between shifts, and a local philosopher expounding on the merits of eating local, even if it's best not to know how local. Vendors bicker good-naturedly, boasting about whose wares have cured more heartbreak, warmed more frozen hands, or fortified more weary night owls for the long stumble home. You watch as an argument breaks out over who got the last potato scallop, only to be resolved by the vendor producing a secret stash from beneath his cart, a miracle worthy of the saints, if the saints were greasy and worked for tips. A couple nearby debates the merits of whelks versus cockles, the loser destined to buy the winner a bag of crisps in penance. Someone tries to barter an old theatre ticket for an extra chestnut, and the vendor, after a moment's consideration, accepts. You stand there in the glow of streetlights and frying oil, a cone of questionable seafood in one hand, a scorched chestnut in the other, and a saveloy resting in your pocket for luck, or later regret. The night air swirls with the mingled scents of vinegar, coal, and daring. Every bite is a wager, every snack a story. In the moment, you're not just eating, you're taking part in the great ongoing adventure of being out, alive, and ever so slightly foolish in 1950s London. Tomorrow you may question your choices. Tonight, though, you're united with every hungry, hopeful soul who's ever navigated the city's midnight markets. You lick your fingers, shrug off your regrets, and move on, fortified, amused, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit braver. You and your friends cross paths with a pair of bobbies who radiate both wholesome British authority and an unspoken threat to write you up for loitering with intent to dance. After a brief lecture about the dangers of too much fun, you're released, provided you promise to keep the noise down and the knees covered. The encounter with the bobbies always happens just when your spirits are highest and your laughter is loudest, midnight, perhaps, or slightly after, when the city's respectable folk are long since tucked up in bed. You and your ragtag party round a corner or spill out of the chippy, only to nearly collide with two figures in starched blue uniforms, helmets gleaming and notebooks poised with the practiced ease of men who have seen it all. They stop you with a look, one eyebrow raised in world-weary amusement, the other firmly set in don't try anything territory. There's a choreography to these meetings, one that everyone in 1950s London knows by heart. First comes the awkward silence, where everyone suddenly forgets how to speak. Then the initial volley. Evening, ladies and gents. Out a bit late, are we? The question is rhetorical, but you answer anyway, stammering something about missed buses and the vital importance of midnight snacks. The taller Bobby, let's call him Sergeant Cheerful, does most of the talking. He's the sort who'd rather resolve things with a firm handshake and a knowing wink. He asks for your names, which everyone provides truthfully, except for old Stan, who can never resist introducing himself as Sir Winston Churchill. This earns a chuckle, but the second Bobby, Constable Stern, is less amused. His job, it seems, is to preserve the dignity of the force and the integrity of local lampposts, which he suspects you may be planning to climb. "Out for a bit of a dance, were you?" Sergeant Cheerful asks, glancing at your battered shoes and still flushed faces. Before you can answer, Constable Stern reminds you that the city has rules, and those rules don't bend for jitterbug enthusiasts or wandering bands of chip-eaters. "Keep the noise down," he says, eyeing the group with a gaze that could curdle milk. "And remember, the knees are to be covered at all times, none of this Charleston business." The conversation then takes a turn into public service announcement territory. You're warned about the dangers of walking alone, the perils of accepting snacks from strangers, a warning given with a side eye at the Savoy, and the mortal risk of too much fun on a Friday. You nod solemnly, making mental notes you have no intention of following. Someone tries to lighten the mood by offering the bobbies a scorched chestnut. Sergeant Cheerful accepts with a wink, while Constable Stern writes something ominous in his notebook, possibly a future screenplay or, more likely, note to self: avoid chestnuts. There's always a gentle ribbing about local mischief, someone's missing bicycle, a particularly rowdy fox, rumours of a haunted postbox. The bobbies assure you they'll look into it, though you suspect their main concern is making sure everyone gets home in one piece, knees respectfully covered and all. It's a curious mix of discipline and neighbourliness, as if being scolded by your favourite uncle and your least favourite schoolmaster at the same time. At last, you're dismissed with a smile and a warning. Stay out of trouble now, and if you must dance, keep it to a respectable shuffle. You promise faithfully, even as you all know that the first strains of jazz will have you swinging again. The bobbies move on, their figures swallowed up by the fog, their whistles silent but ever present. You watch them go, relieved and secretly amused. The night resumes its pulse. Your group erupts in giggles as soon as you're out of earshot, comparing who looked the guiltiest and who managed to keep a straight face. Running into the bobbies isn't just a rite of passage, it's a reminder that in 1950s London, even the law has a sense of humour, as long as you keep the knees covered and your mischief mild. Midnight, and disaster strikes. A heel snaps, a shoelace gives way, or the inner soul migrates north for the winter. Suddenly you're forced to choose between bravely limping on or going barefoot over cobblestones slick with 1,000 years of British weather and bad decisions. Shoe emergencies are the silent epidemic of the London night out, lurking around every uneven curb, every sticky pub floor, every dance hall with more splinters than floorboards. No one plans for catastrophe, but inevitably it finds you. The telltale wobble, the dreadful snap, the sinking realization as your foot goes sideways and the world tilts with it. For a moment the party's noise recedes and it's just you, your broken shoe, and the infinite wisdom of hindsight. You freeze in place, surveying the damage. A snapped heel dangles precariously, a loose shoelace flops like a surrender flag, or, worst of all, the sole of your shoe peels away with a flapping sound that echoes through your soul. Your friends gather round, offering sympathy and increasingly absurd suggestions. "Can you walk on your tiptoes?" someone asks. Maybe we can borrow a stapler from the cloakroom. Another proposes stuffing a chip packet into the shoe as an emergency insole. Necessity is the mother of invention, but also of highly questionable decisions. There is a brief, whispered debate. Do you brave the London night barefoot, risking puddles of mysterious origin, or soldier on with improvised repairs? Someone offers up their scarf, it's only a little damp, for a makeshift bandage, while another, more practical soul pulls out a packet of plasters. The shoe is mummified in layers of fabric and good intentions. It's fashion-forward, you insist, hobbling valiantly. The journey resumes, but every step is now a performance, part limp, part shuffle, part ballet. You cling to your friends for balance, cursing every designer who ever made style and comfort mutually exclusive. The city's ancient cobblestones are suddenly treacherous, slick with rain, history, and a dash of existential dread. You begin to count lampposts, congratulating yourself for every 10 feet managed without disaster. As you limp along, you become acutely aware of the other walking wounded. You spot a fellow traveller cradling a battered brogue, another sporting mismatched socks with the resignation of someone who lost a shoe in a bet. There is a silent, knowing nod exchanged, a recognition of shared struggle, of being inducted into the secret society of footwear failure survivors. Then comes the real test, the next dance. Your friends, filled with optimism and a whiff of gin, encourage you onto the floor. You attempt to keep up, inventing new moves that disguise your lopsidedness. It's not the waltz or jitterbug, but rather the limping Lambeth walk, and you sell it with a grin. The local Lothario tries to sweep you into a spin, only to be met with a swift, careful, "These are limited edition." Laughter rings out, and suddenly your misfortune feels less like a disaster, and more like the story everyone will remember. When the night winds down, the final gauntlet awaits, the walk home. You strategize like a general, plotting routes with the fewest puddles and most forgiving pavements. A sympathetic friend offers a piggyback, and you decline, not out of pride, but for fear of both of you ending up in the gutter. Eventually, against all odds, you limp, hobble, or, yes, go barefoot the final stretch. The cold stone, shocking but oddly liberating. At last, you reach your door, your battered shoe a testament to the night's adventures. You set it down gently by the bed, already planning how you'll regale everyone with tales of survival. The heel, the laces, the flapping sole, they're badges of honour, proof that you faced the night, the dance, and the cobblestones, and you live to tell the tale. In 1950s London, shoes come and go, but stories, especially the ones about your most dramatic shoeless dash through the night, are forever. You walk a new friend, or perhaps a future spouse, back to their building, stopping beneath a flickering street lamp for the world's most awkward kiss goodnight. The air smells faintly of coal, roses, and impending curfews. You both vow to write, knowing full well the Royal Mail may never deliver that letter, and that you've probably given them the wrong address anyway. It's the classic end to a 1950s London night out, painted with a palette of hopeful nerves and atmospheric smog. You stroll side by side down a quiet street, shoes clicking on wet pavement, sharing shy laughter about the night's triumphs and mishaps. The world feels both enormous and shrunken to this single dim-lit stretch of road, where every shadow is a secret and every gust of wind feels like the city whispering, "Don't ruin it." The conversation grows slower, softer, as you approach the garden gate. Gone are the earlier bursts of bravado, the wild jitterbug, the audacious late-night snack orders, the cheerful sparring with the bobbies. Instead, there's a gentle hesitancy as you drift into the uncertain territory of what comes after. You talk about family, mum's always up waiting, nose pressed to the curtains, about dreams. Maybe next year I'll get a proper job, move to the country, buy a dog, and about the band at the dance hall. They never play your song, do they? Beneath the flickering street lamp, a spotlight for your grand finale, you fumble for words, each sentence interrupted by the hum of electricity overhead and the distant clatter of a late-night milk float. Your hands twitch, unsure whether to reach for theirs or for your own pockets. You sway a little, partly from fatigue and partly from the thrill of a night lived to the hilt. All around, London holds its breath, a city built on stolen moments and secret meetings at the gates of terraced gardens. At last, the goodbye. It could be cinematic, a sweeping embrace, a passionate declaration. But this is real life, and the choreography is all elbows and nerves. Your faces edge closer, lips brush in a kiss that's equal parts sweet and comic. Someone's nose gets in the way, or you bump teeth, and you both laugh, delighted and mortified at once. The moment passes, stretched and golden, then retreats into the safe haven of awkward silence. Promises are made as if by tradition. "I'll write," you insist, already rehearsing the letter in your head. "Dear you, last night was wonderful," if you ignore the whelks. Your new friend vows to do the same, fingers crossed behind their back, because, well, that's just how these things go. Addresses are swapped, scribbled hastily on scraps of chip paper or the back of a bus ticket, destined to become either cherished relics or the answer to a future pub quiz. Where exactly is 14.5 Whimsy Crescent anyway? You linger in the lamplight, saying goodbye one more time, neither quite willing to turn away. The garden gate creaks open, and your friend slips inside, pausing to wave from the stoop, their silhouette framed by rose bushes and the glow of a hallway bulb. You watch as they disappear, heart thumping, face warm from the chill and from the optimism that maybe, just maybe, this is how something truly lasting begins. As you retrace your steps, the night air seems softer, your cares lighter. The city is suddenly full of possibilities, unopened letters, untold stories, second chances in the next dance hall queue. You smile at the absurdity and hopefulness of it all, the knowledge that love, or at least a very good crush, can bloom in the shadow of ration books, misty lampposts and shoes that will never quite recover. Because in post-war London, romance is always an act of faith, written in smudged ink, sealed with an awkward kiss, and delivered by hope alone. So tonight, as you sink back into your own bed, maybe with clean sheets, a full stomach, and a phone quietly charging on the nightstand, take a moment to think about that long, slightly ridiculous night you just survived in 1950s London. You navigated queues with military discipline, drank pints that tasted faintly of regret, danced to music that demanded both courage and flexible knees, and trusted late-night food that asked very few questions and answered even fewer. And somehow, you made it home. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't efficient, and it definitely wasn't sober. But it was human. People in post-war London didn't go out to impress strangers on the internet or document every moment. They went out to forget ration books, bomb damage, and another long work week. They laughed in smoky pubs, shared chips on cold curbs, argued about music, fell briefly and awkwardly in love, and told stories they'd repeat for decades, usually starting with, "You won't believe this," but there's something comforting in that. In a city still patching itself back together, nights out were small acts of rebellion, dancing when the floor was worn thin, singing when the future was uncertain, walking home through fog and flickering streetlights with sore feet and full hearts, knowing tomorrow would come whether you were ready or not. So as your breathing slows and the noise of the day fades, maybe offer a quiet nod of appreciation to the people who came before you, the ones who survived on strong tea, bad food, shared laughter, and the promise that tomorrow might be a little better. They didn't have luxury, but they had resilience, and somehow that was enough. Now let the music fade, the pub lights dim, and the city grow quiet. You're home, you're warm, and unlike 1953, the last tube isn't going anywhere. sleep easy.